All right, good afternoon. So let's talk about TSR Dungeons and Dragons basic rules, the Moldvay set. This was the game that this was our go-to game, and this was the game that I ran for all my buddies from 1980, I don't know when this box came out, 80, 81, until I moved out of the house. And even years later when I was married and invited all the guys over for a couple of sessions in the basement on my pool table, I ran this for the guys. And then I took about an 18-year break and didn't touch anything. I don't know what had happened to my one book of this. I was one of those guys that actually cut the book up and put it in a 3-wing binder. I don't know what happened to that binder, but that's where it ended up. But what's amazing is I had never run this game properly. I mean, as far as actually rules is written raw. So you could say from day one that I cracked this book open, it was pretty much homebrewed. And also my memories of this were clearly skewed based on what I had used in the rules and what I had ignored in the rules. And some things I ignored because I didn't like it. Some things I just clearly didn't pay attention to. And it wasn't until a few years ago when LOA Jose and I were discussing Moldvay and what they loved about Moldvay and that it dawned on me that I didn't even recall. It's like I blocked these things out. I didn't recall that you rolled for distance in every encounter. I argued with LOA. That isn't in the rules, and sure enough, it is. Here's the thing, though, and of course it has mapper and caller. And the reason I'm discussing this is I want to start. I want to run a couple of Moldvay sessions. Heck, I would like to run a lot of these old basic, just levels 1 through 3. So one of the reasons I left home is it was the first game I got my hands on, but it also stops at level 3. Well, the basic rules, these old basic rules, also stop at level 3. This is quite literally meant to be a introduction. Characters are basically stopped at 3, and you're going to basically do dungeon crawls or tavern, conversations, and you're going to have some overland wilderness, but there's no rules for those things, and there's no rules yet for going to the next level. That comes in the expert set. So anyway, one of the reasons I loved Moldvay was, once you get to level 3, it's kind of like your character's as good as he's going to get. It would keep everything in this very tight kind of frame of reference. And there was not a lot of bloat that way, and kept the game constantly interesting and still dangerous, but, simple. Anyway, that isn't the point of this video. So I was thinking, because we play OSE, Todd's Joth campaign, we use OSE, and OSE is basically the exact duplicate of this game. It's a remaster of this version of D&D with the expert set attached. So it's this Dungeons & Dragons BX rewritten and reorganized, but there are still a couple of things that this has that does not. And I'm going through this thinking, okay, if it comes up and people ask me, how is this different than OSE? I wanted to know how to answer that question, because for the most part, OSE is identical. But I'm reading through it today, boning up, and I see this thing that I'm telling you literally the first time I recall this rule. Right here. DM rolls all damage. Literally, they roll the damage for the PCs, and they roll the damage for the monsters. That is very, very cool. What that did, of course, was probably create even more adversarial relationship between early because I never did this. I always let the players roll their dice. I mean, it's fun. People want to roll their dice. They want to roll to hit, and they want to roll that fat damage, and they want to be aware of how much damage they're doing. But I thought, my gosh, what would it be like to play this game and the players don't know how much damage they're doing? It really would make the game that much more mysterious and that much more, in a way, I won't say terrifying, that's exaggeration, but makes the game that much more mysterious and that much more difficult. But also what it does is it means, again, it imparts that the GM really did narrate everything. Right, the GM set the table. The GM would narrate what they see, and then they would make decisions, simple decisions. I'm going to attack. I'm going to use my spell. I'm going to do this. I'm going to open the door. I'm going to pick the lock. I'm going to investigate the room, and then the GM would narrate all that information. So the GM is really the eyes, the ears, the nose. I mean, we know this, but if I'm rolling their damage, I really have to narrate I won't say combat, but I definitely have to narrate what that damage to the goblin looks like, so they are aware of, for the most part, how much damage they think they did. And I thought, what a very cool thing if we ran this rules as written, what that would look like. And I thought, well, that's definitely not in OSE. Neither is mapper and caller. I'm thinking there's also no mapper and caller in OSE. They brought all that up to date, right? Well, I pull up my OSE. Let me go get it here. My OSE is in my game PDF collection. Where is OSE? Here it is, OSE. And I'm looking at OSE, and guess what OSE has? Mapper and caller. So that blew my mind. So this is almost identical to Moldvay. So any character you make in Moldvay would work in Joth. It's the same rules, exact same rules, except it goes up to level 14, and of course basic goes up to only level 3. So this includes expert set, basically. But that's not what blew my mind. I'm thinking, oh man, so it has mapper and caller. I had no idea it had the rules for mapper and caller, because we don't use them. We use marching order to some degree, but we aren't doing mapper and caller. And this is something I've done in the past that was great fun, but not always very successful. You have to have a party that wants to role play with themselves and discuss their strategies, and then one person expresses those strategies to the GM. So it's better, it's easier to communicate. Matter of fact, online, this would probably be even more effective for online play, because the players will do what they do. They're gonna have their huddle. They're gonna discuss what they should do. But it's so much easier when the one person turns to the GM and says, "Okay, Dell's gonna open the door and lead through. I'm going to get the torch ready, and Bill is going to take up the rear, and Steve is mapping in the very back." And I now know exactly where everybody's at. It's one person telling me. It speeds up the game, and then ultimately we go to the very next roll. He opens the door. We either roll to spring a trap if there's a trap there, or we roll for surprise if there's a goblin or something on the other side of the door, whatever the case may be. And Dell's character would be immediately affected by those rolls if he's the one that's opening the door. Mapper, of course, in a dungeon crawl was important for history, but also important for getting out. We would use it as a way to get out. But I was shocked to see this is in OSE. So how accurate is OSE? There, right? Well, anyway, I discovered that the GM's supposed to roll all damage for both sides of the group. And I'm thinking, that can't be in OSE. There is no way this is in OSE. And there's no way this is in OSE, because I've been playing OSE now with Todd and company. I've never run OSE. I've only played in it, and we have never done this. We've never followed the combat sequence. I come over to OSE, and I find out it has the exact same combat sequence. We just don't use it. We've never followed the combat sequence, which is not a problem. It's just an observation. I didn't know that this combat sequence was also in OSE, and I think it's important, obviously, for strategy and for when guys can shoot missiles, when they can move, when they can use magic. But this is not in OSE. So they definitely removed the idea that GM rolls damage. They took that out for OSE, and I think that's an interesting thing. Almost everything else is identical. Why did they take out DM rolls damage? And I'm assuming that's a modern sensibility, right? They know that modern gamers are going to say, bullshit, I'm rolling my damage. So they cut it off at the pass and said, we're not going to put that in OSE. So I thought that was fascinating. Anyway, but I am thrilled to see how close this is to Moldvay, even more so than I thought. I didn't know Mapper and Caller was in here. I am very surprised to see that it actually does have the exact same combat operations, combat turn order, which personally I would like to use, but I didn't know it was in here because we haven't been doing it that way. But this is very important because the winning side does these things in order. Check monster morale. The winning side moves. Then the winning side takes missile. Then the winning side casts a spell. Then melee attacks occur. Then the losing side checks monster morale. Right, and this is important. You're checking morale at the top of the round, and you're checking it again when you switch sides. This implies there's a losing side, which means you would check monster morale at the top of the losing side. So let's say the players win initiative, and they kill 2 goblins, and they kill a third with melee, and there's only 6 goblins. Dude, there is no doubt those goblins are going to be checking the morale right in the middle of that turn. So once the goblin's turn comes up, first thing I'm doing is checking morale to see if these goblins run like hell. Then if not, there's movement, missile attack spell, and then melee. And then we start again at the top of the round. So I was really shocked to see that it actually has the sequence in the book. I've never looked really closely at the OSE books. I'm not running games. I'm only making characters for Joth. So I've only used the character rules in OSE because I've not run OSE. So I'm thrilled to see that it's basically the same game. And the sequence is followed except for GM rolling damage, which is pretty cool. And I think that could make the game much more difficult, but also much more mysterious because you don't know how much damage you're doing to these goblins, right? It's kind of a cool thing. But I bet this created some serious sense of players versus DM. One of the issues we have from old school, it carries up to the modern, is many guys that played back in the day had adversarial GMs or vice versa. It just created an adversarial relationship that I think many players, it unfortunately gave them negative experiences in the early hobby. So I can imagine the DM rolling everybody's damage behind the curtain. This had to cause some consternation between players and GMs. This had to cause some, dude, I've hit him 4 times and he ain't dead yet kind of thing, right? Because the GM keeps rolling ones, right? Right? It's just crazy. Anyway, I just had to share this because here I am, 52 years old, looking at my favorite, my all-time, well, I wouldn't say favorite. Well, it is, but it's the game I played the most for my friends. I ran the most for my friends, and I have the most fond memories of, and I want to run again now at 52. But I'm hoping to run it rules as written. And I'm discovering in reading it how many of the rules I just didn't realize were there, and how many things I was doing, I ignored or wasn't doing properly. But then how many things are here for me to run this rules as written would be I think it'd be a great experience to see what does it feel like to have me rolling your damage hidden from you. And what if I ask you guys to organize caller and mapper? It would be great fun. But anyway, what am I learning about this game 40 years later? Right? Quite a bit. All right, bye.